Well, if it isn't the Talking Points podcast, back again with me, Tomo, with Matt Amos, with Hayden Gullis. Aldas is not here, probably shagging a go-kart. That's what he does on weekends. It's not a weekend anyway, but you know, he carries it over because he's loving it at the minute. But thank you everyone for coming, everyone watching on YouTube, everyone listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to 5-star likes and get all that stuff done early and you don't have to think about it later. Easy peasy. Now, lads, this last week has been pretty heavy, hasn't it? There's been a lot going on and we've talked to death on our own individual platforms and on Twitter about Vettel retiring, about Alonso leaving to Aston Martin, what this means for Piastri, and now what it means for Daniel Ricciardo. Look at that face. Look at the face on Matt Amos right now. It seems that the writing is on the wall for everyone's favourite Australian, being replaced ironically by another Australian, it seems, at McLaren.
A non-washed one.
I mean, look, listen, good hygiene's important, Hayden. And I guess, look, before we get into Ricciardo specifically, because that's what we want the bulk of this conversation to be around, what his options are, what the future potentially holds. I guess, Matt, in terms of McLaren, from McLaren's point of view, to make this seeming decision to kind of tap up Oscar Piastri and not give Ricciardo the time, and it sounds like they're going to have to pay, you know, you can be sad for Ricciardo, but it sounds like he's in for a pretty big payday if they do buy him out of his contract. You know, from a McLaren perspective, how are you looking at this kind of situation? Do you think they're wrong to do what they've done?
I think, the big loser out of all this will be McLaren, because they've gone out, like, both, Zach Brown and Seidel have gone out and said, we are committed to making it work with Daniel. And they've yet to actually make any, statement regarding any contract. They're the one team who've fully just kind of stayed fully quiet on this, which good sense of them. But as soon as the news is going to get announced, that obviously Piastri is going to be taking that seat. We've heard the report now that Daniel has been informed that he's going to be replaced for 2023. It's really, really fallen bad on McLaren, and like from a PR wise, if you go to any social post they've done since all of this has gone out, like if you look at the comments or anything, as much as like we say don't be toxic or anything like that, like you can just tell from the fans' perspective, it's no longer this, McLaren are a fun team and this is where we're going to get behind. Now it's kind of like, you both kind of like lied, or I don't want to say lied, but it's based on the information that they had at the time. However, the impression they gave to all the fan base, including us, not everyone else, and the journos and such, is that Daniel Ricciardo was going to be there for the next year, and then to literally have all of this talk go behind the scenes, signing Piastri, kind of keeping it under wraps, like that makes the team seem so kind of untrustworthy, and I think it will have a knock-on effect with the fan base. I know it does. It has for me at least, because it's no longer like, they've got Lando Norris, that's a good partnership, and we know like Lando and Piastri, them two together would be a great partnership. But kind of literally at what cost, It's like, it's now made the kind of like a bit of a sour taste in your mouth, especially like everyone's perceptions towards, Seidel and Zach Brown. And I think everyone can look at Daniel's season, and it's clear that like on paper, it's not been good. That can be to any excuse I can throw out the book, whether that's been through adapting to
and
the
he's
car.
tried.
And I've definitely tried, and don't knock me for it. However, if you just look at the like as results on the paper without any context, of course, yes, it's not been a great season for Daniel. However, also on the same paper, you've had both Daniel and the team boss have said we are committed. So for them to now 180 that, like I could only imagine what reaction this would have had if this actually had stayed quiet until the end of the season, and then they announced that Daniel was being dropped and being replaced by Oscar. I could only imagine the reaction from that. But it is what it is. It's what's happened, and now obviously we're going to be talking about what his options are. But it is just a very sad day. Like I don't like, for me at least. It's kind of hard now for me to kind of back McLaren the rest of the season. They were my favourite team, and now it's kind of like,
savage, scathing take from Matt. Well, Hayden, so do you agree that McLaren could have handled this better? Do you think there's other things they could have done to maybe be a bit more respectful, or is Matt just being a hysterical Ricciardo fan? Because that could be true as well.
It's very true.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. Obviously, everyone's got an opinion. Obviously, people can have bias about these things as well. I think with McLaren, I think they were very much hoping on, because we know that Piastri had that contract that was up after the 31st of July. So McLaren can't just come out and say, we're going to want someone different, because if Alpine do pick up Oscar Piastri, who's their main choice to replace Ricciardo for next season, then Ricciardo's going to be pissed and be like, well, I don't want to stay here if you don't want me. So you have to kind of keep everybody kind of happy until everything has aligned like it has done. I mean, it's. I think because Ricciardo is such a likable character, it's hit harder than others. For example, if it was someone like Tsunoda just being kicked out of AlphaTauri, Stroll, people who also haven't really been performing as well but don't have as big a following base, it would just sort of be pushed aside and be like, okay, fair enough, I see it. They've not been performing as well. The team's going to want a driver to maybe freshen things up and the hope that they can change things. I understand from Matt's point of view, you're going to be annoyed, you're going to be devastated, especially if at the moment you don't know where your driver's going to go. We're going to discuss that. There are plenty of options, but it just all depends on whether teams want him, whether they can afford him. There's a lot of things that come into it, but we'll discuss that for sure. But yeah, I mean, I think they definitely could have handled things better. They always can. But things just kind of have aligned at this stage, and they want to take it in a different direction, which is just unfortunate. And we've seen it so many times before in Formula 1. How solid is an actual contract at the end of the day? Sergio Perez with Racing Point Aston Martin, he was supposed to be on that team till the end of next year, I think it was, or something like that. So, and they just went, yeah, no, we're done. We want Sebastian Vettel. So these things happen. Fem made a great point, my girlfriend. She said that Daniel Ricciardo, for the rest of the season, should just finish in 20th place just to piss off McLaren. Unfortunately, she didn't really think it through too much, because a lot of people came back to her and just said that's not too far off where he finishes anyway. So,
damn. You know what? Sometimes the truth hurts. I mean, look, I think that
factually that's not correct.
I think. Well, is it? I mean, it's kind of.
No, Hayden. No, we're forgetting Hayden's boys normally there, so it swings and roundabouts.
I mean, yeah,
but we're not talking about quali.
Well.
We're talking about the race.
The great Stroll Ricciardo battle to get out of Q1, and Albon actually. All of our boys propping Q1 potential.
We're the Q1 merchants.
We are the Q1 merchants. Yeah, we don't choose glory. We don't choose glory here on the Talking Points podcast. No, I think that it's almost that Alpine kind of forced the situation when they decided to announce Piastri, because obviously with that announcement, Oscar, as far as he's concerned, like there's not a contract there, so was kind of forced into making some kind of statement rather than it just sitting there and gathering momentum and him still not saying anything. That was kind of it put McLaren into a kind of lose, like they lose if they say something, they lose if they don't. I think it's one of these. I do wonder how many of these types of situations go on completely behind closed doors and they never kind of see the light of day, because there's clearly a lot of mechanisms at play. Now, a few things. First of all, I have heard that 31st of July date was getting chucked around a lot. Apparently, that's actually not true. I've seen Chris Medland tweet say that that's actually not a thing, but there's other mechanisms in Piastri's contracts, not a timing thing as such, that weren't, but we don't know what they are. So it's still all very kind of mysterious. And again, like none of this has been confirmed. We're all kind of going off scraps, but there's a lot of respected publications and journalists that are talking about this in a very kind of matter-of-fact way. But also, I think this kind of illustrates, because when we say McLaren, I know you're saying, Matt, McLaren have been very much like they want to, support Daniel, that they want Daniel. It's in terms of out and out saying they want Daniel for next year. I've heard that from Andreas Seidel, but I think ultimately this comes down to Zach Brown, right? As far as I'm concerned, like he's the one in charge. He's the one who's signing. He's the one who's scooping up IndyCar talent left, right, and centre with dodgy contracts as well. By the way, like not being funny, Felix Rosenquist, there's all that going on, and obviously Alex Palou is like a carbon copy situation as well. So I agree. I think that reflects quite badly on McLaren. But I think in this instance, Piastri is such a talent, and Alpine had such a talent on their hands. And again, it's the fact that we're saying past tense had
Yeah.
is just crazy. And look, I think if they saw the opportunity to snap up an Oscar Piastri, the potential of Ricardo Norris was really high, and it's just never reached those heights. And I think the potential of a Norris Piastri, given how much money they're paying to Ricardo, given that it hasn't worked and it's a season and a half, if it had been a strong start to this season for Daniel, I think it's a different story. But the fact that there's two different philosophies of car, and Daniel, and even if it is more McLaren's fault, it's easier for them to just switch a driver than it is to change the complete philosophy of a car and the team around it. So I personally don't know what more McLaren could have done. I get that Seidel said things and maybe shouldn't have been so assertive on, because I believe that Andreas Seidel wanted to make it last, but I think this decision has come from above him.
But one thing that will last, though, is the tattoo that Zach Brown got of McLaren's most recent win, and now they've kicked him out. So
a constant reminder of what could have been. But I think as well, over Daniel's tenure, yes, he had his moments, but ultimately the consistency that Lando was able to give in that car, I think, Piastri's a risk. I mean, boys, do you think... Hayden, do you think Piastri will live up to this? Because surely this puts even more pressure and expectation on his head.
Yeah, there definitely is with him because he's an unknown character coming into it. But I feel like if you've dominated F3, dominated F2, who else has done that at the end of the day? The likes of Charles Leclerc, the likes of George Russell, those two names currently in two top teams fighting for podiums on the regular occasion. So he definitely has the pedigree to challenge. Whether he can really convert that up against Lando Norris, because Lando, again, if he goes up against Piastri and wipes the floor with him, then I feel like Lando's one of those drivers who's over and underrated at the same time. Some people over and push him way too far. Some people don't rate him as enough, and I think that comes from, my girlfriend's a Ricciardo fan, so she hates Lando Norris because he's beating Ricciardo every weekend. So, and she's like, oh, he's not as good as you think he is. But, Ricciardo's not a slouch. Ricciardo's a great driver. So, it's going to be difficult, I think, as well for Oscar Piastri to go up against Norris. If he can match him, then I think McLaren have got two very solid drivers. But it is a big if because it's an unknown character.
Yeah, and I think with the McLaren car itself, I mean, Lando has obviously come out and said it's not suiting his drivability, his driving style. And I do think the younger pedigree coming into it are better at adapting to different machinery, whereas you got the more traditional guys. We saw even Lewis struggling at the beginning of the season, and obviously you don't need to vouch for what his accomplishments are. He's now getting to a point where it's working for him, but obviously at the beginning of the season wasn't really working. Same with Pierre Gasly. I don't want to say the word veteran because he's still so young, but experienced enough to know of the sport. And at the beginning of this season, couldn't really work the car, and he's still sort of struggling a little bit now. Whereas here, obviously, we can't ignore Piastri's F3 and F2 sort of dominance,
and Renault Euro Cup as well, 3 in a row it was. Remember
exactly that, but. Then it's as soon as you then transfer that to F1, you do need to kind of treat it as there's a lot of hype going on at the moment. It's almost as if he was a previous F1 winner, which he's not. And this is a different ball game. And yes, just because you won in those lower categories doesn't mean you're going to do really well in this one as well. That's not me saying he's not going to perform great. But I think some expectations will need to be met. That at the beginning races, he's not going to be up to par with Lando. No, that's not going to happen. We've seen that with every rookie coming in because they need to find their footing. Even with having rookie tests, as it were, different cars behave different ways. And it's just I do worry that there's a bit of overhypeness with Piastri. I do want him to succeed because I think he's a great driver. It's just as I said, it's a bit of a sour taste because it's literally my favourite driver being affected by it. I do think it's interesting with the whole contract situation because I think in my head, I think what Mark Webber did, his manager, to sort of work it out is that I reckon it all kind of started out as this was McLaren's backup plan. That if Ricciardo had said to the team, okay, I'm not going to continue. This is my break clause. I'm going to go somewhere else. Then he would have got the call up to do that. And then there must have been some conversation. And that's what I think why, because there's so many different contracts they're looking through at the moment. So that's what I reckon has happened. They had an early contract that, like, if Ricciardo was to leave, then Piastri would have come in. And then at some point they had a chat where they've actually upgraded that contract. But also we've got to acknowledge that if Ricciardo chooses to leave to go to a different team, he won't then get the buyout, I don't believe, from McLaren because he's choosing to leave. Whereas if McLaren force him to leave, then in theory, he then needs to sit out that next season. Otherwise, he won't get that money because that's what McLaren are paying him for, if that makes sense. So I reckon that's kind of why we're not hearing too much on at the moment. I don't know if you heard anything else about that.
Yeah,
but
I mean, obviously, because it's kind of similar to the old Kimi Räikkönen situation, but obviously he was paid off by Ferrari to not race for Ferrari. I think he was, as far as I'm aware, that I think there was potentially a McLaren move on the table, but then Button got that seat, and then he decided to go WRC. So I'm not sure if that would affect whether Ricciardo, because it would be mad if Ricciardo went back to Alpine and then was getting paid a wage by McLaren at the same time as racing for like their closest competitors.
Because one
would be
thing
crazy.
wouldn't happen without the other, but then obviously I think that's the reason why everyone's kind of on the team side is staying a bit quiet because obviously their lawyers are going to be looking into it because if they're like, if we don't need to pay like Ricciardo, I think it was something like 18 million, I think it was.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah, if we don't need to pay him off, then and he's already got a contract with Alpine, but then it's basically like everyone's going to then kind of wait until certain announcements are sort of done, because then if he's announced, oh, I've joined Alpine, McLaren could be like, oh, wait, so you've chosen to leave, you've done the break clause, so then wherefore we don't need to pay you this breakout sort of thing.
Yeah.
But again, I'm not too sure about the whole situation with that.
Yeah, it sounds like that Ricciardo's not incentivized to voluntarily go. Like, if there's a contract and you want to pay it, McLaren, to replace me with this young Aussie, then so be it. Give me the money. Also, one last point I think on Piastri, I think it's worth making is that, yes, there's a lot of comparisons to Leclerc and Russell when you look at the junior career. But also, when Leclerc joined F1, he joined an Alfa Romeo Sauber team who were like lower end of the midfield. He got like 3 P7s in a row, I think, at the end of the year. Mm-hmm. So he was able to really, perform well in that car. But, with that seat, expectations were very measured. Weren't low necessarily, but very measured. And I think you can say the same for Jules. Jumping into that Williams, we knew it was a bit of a boat. And once we knew where that car was, and against like a teammate like Robert Kubica, who obviously come back after his injury, so unfortunately we never saw the driver he once was. I think expectations once again were low to measured. I think with Piastri, going to a top midfield team anyway would bring a bit more pressure. But especially with all this, because it's been so dramatic and it's such a seemingly big risky move. I think eyeballs are going to be. Yeah, look, I think Oscar's done a lot of mileage with Alpine, and that's part of the reason Alpine feel a bit betrayed by this. I don't really get it. Personally, I just think if you really wanted him, you would have
put him in.
Yeah, you would have. You would have made sure that contract was absolute, mustard. It was top tier. There was no way of him getting out, but. Whatever, like, at the end of the day, it's going to be interesting to see with Piastri. Ricciardo, now obviously, first of all, I think we can all safely say that I'm pretty sure he will get a seat. I would be incredibly surprised if he's not in F1.
I believe I read that he's been approached by 4 teams, or had conversations with 4 teams so far. So,
and they're all Formula E.
They're all at his local
He did get
car.
asked though, didn't he?
He did get asked, but he's already shut that down.
Imagine the backhandedness. Just be like, do you want to go join our Formula E team instead? No.
They're all Indy lights.
I'd literally
Extreme
fucking crease, and that's me liking Formula E. I'd just be like...
Extreme.
But at least then, if he did go to Formula E, I would be able to actually meet him. But also, we've got to remember, all of this is my fault. I did curse him at the beginning of the season. I tweeted saying, if he gets a podium, I'll tweet the number 3 on my leg. And now he's leaving McLaren. It's all my fault.
Still get a podium, though.
Things can happen, Matt. You never know, right? It isn't done. But anyway, the options...
There was a race in Monaco once where everybody DNF but 3 drivers, so you can still get a podium. So
that is very,
Albon,
very
Stroll,
true.
and Ricciardo on the podium.
Oh my
God.
Ultimate Backstreet Boys.
Imagine the scenes. All right, so options. Let's evaluate them, I guess. Let's look at the options that we think are realistic for Ricciardo. Start with the one that's, I guess, the most logical, Alpine. A return to the team that he was only at a year and a half ago, remember? Like, he left at the end of 2020 after a very, very strong season at Renault. He was, for me, one of the strongest drivers that year. His stock was still very, very high at the time. And a return to Alpine, a kind of swap deal, Hayden, almost in some way, where they're getting a driver back that we know not necessarily can perform in this type of car, but, you know, Daniel was able to perform in the last generation of car, just not the Mclaren. He was able to perform in that Renault. So could that be a good answer for everyone? Because Otmar has openly said he wouldn't push that away just because of Ricciardo's past with the team.
It's the one that everyone wants, and I think it's the one that Ricciardo fans bang the drum of the most. Is the move to Alpine. It's a good move, like you say. He performed well. Yeah, bang that drum. He performed well back in 2020. You know,
well.
He picked it up, especially in that second half of the season. I think 2 podiums for the team as well. The one thing that worries me is that he was the one who left. He was the one who said, I don't want to race for you anymore. I want to take a sideways step over to McLaren, who was their rival at the time as well, and just said, yeah, basically, I don't want to race for you guys anymore. I want to go over here to a similar team in a similar place. Has that burnt bridges? Is that going to be something that sticks with Alpine? The only difference is, okay, it's under a different name. It's still the same team, but there are new team owners of like Otmar Safnauer, isn't there? So there's new people sort of in charge of it, so it could allow it to be a bit easier on him moving over. But it's definitely the most ideal switch, especially for Ricciardo fans, because if the trajectory is the same, Alpine is still going to be in that fighting for that 4th position and the best place for Ricciardo to fight for podiums. And if anything crazy happens, like we have seen last year, Hungary, for example, race wins as well. So it would be a good place for him to move as long as those bridges aren't burnt.
Yeah, and I think for me, I think it makes the most sense to all of us for him to return there. I mean, like, they've also got loads of data prior of like how he likes the car set up, and it's mainly with the braking.
True.
That's the main thing, and that's one part of the actual car which you can translate over to the new generation. That you're not having to go through so much brand new, like not a fresh start. They can go back through the old data, be like, right, what was his previous notes? What did he like about the braking? Because that's the main issues he's been having throughout all of this with McLaren from both last year and this year. And they'll be able to translate that onto what his setup is. Yes, there is like a new team owners. I fully understand as well. Like, yeah, it will be awkward for him to go back there because, you know, they had this sort of vision, but he wasn't really fully sold on it because he knew that the whole team was kind of changing. Yes, they pretty much just changed the name, but whatever vision they got promised, he really didn't really back it, and that's why he moved across to McLaren. However, I feel like if he was to go back to McLaren, the main thing about there, it would be kind of fighting of like who's going to be now their main driver. Is it going to be him, or is it going to be, you know, Ocon? And I think like that will take a bit of getting used to, and I think they could be a really good driver pairing as well. But then it's kind of like, well, who's going to be outperforming the other person? Because, you know, I think it's comfortable to say that like Alonso has been doing really well against Ocon, but it seems that Alpine have invested into Ocon for the long term. So that'll be my sort of main thing. But I do believe that if he was to go back to Alpine, I think Otmar will be getting ready to get another tattoo.
Hey, go on, Otmar.
Hey.
Well, no, that is the thing, right? So, yeah, you raised some good points. So, obviously, Cyril is no longer there, and he was the man most heartbroken because, of course, he was team principal at the time when Daniel decided to leave. You've still got Luca De Meo, who's Renault CEO, Renault Group, who's, you know, he's got a big interest in F1. He takes quite a, you know, involved capacity, and as far as I'm aware, he was quite hurt by Daniel leaving. So I think, you know, the De Meo effects might be the biggest, maybe hindrance to that move happening. To be honest, I think on a team level, of the people that I've spoke to a couple of people who, you know, worked at the team at the time, and I think, you know, the people I've spoken to are very much like, we love Daniel, like we would welcome him back with open arms. And I agree, actually, Matt, with what you were saying about, the fact that, Ricciardo proved that he could drive quick in the past generation of car, yet he was slow in the past generation of McLaren. And there was a lot of talk, and that he was. Well, I remember Carlos Sainz, there was a quote from him, like after Daniel's first go in the McLaren, he was like, "Oh, it's a bit weird, isn't it?" Because that McLaren just has some kind of weird, philosophy to it. And obviously, again, it's been working with Lando. Lando's been able to translate those performances into this year. I have faith, I have confidence that if Daniel was to jump into this generation of Alpine, he would be doing a much better job and a much more measured job than he is able in the McLaren. Exactly what you said about, it was the same with Kevin Magnussen when he went back to Haas. They had all this data on him. It enabled him to hit the ground running and get that P5, 6, whatever it was in the first race. Like, I think that it makes a lot of sense from, Alpine's point of view. You've still got this massively... that they could make some, funny video where it's, really awkward, Daniel walking back into the office and everyone with, dartboards with his faces, taking him off the walls. They could just, they could roll with that. And Daniel's still hot property. He's still, a massively... loved, we've talked about that, maybe, because he's got a big fan base and he's really likable. People have been a bit more upset than if it was a Yuki Tsunoda, like you said, Hayden. But I think as well, that commercial weight and him and Ocon as well, I'm not being funny, he did wipe the floor with Ocon in 2020. I think Ocon's a better driver since then. He's got more bedded into the team. And I think that one, like we said, logically it makes the most sense. There's a few egos about, but I think actually for everyone, for me, that's the move.
And I think, it's one thing to have an ego, but then it's another thing of, well, this is also the driver who got you 3 podiums when he was with you, and he did the job. And it's kind of do you think you will get that with your current drivers? And, obviously, that's what McLaren have been like, nope, don't think so, off you go. Whereas Renault could be like, oh, no, he did this for us, so absolutely, let's bring him in, because something was working there. Another interesting thing I want to quickly just jump on as well is that recently, this has only happened I think today or yesterday, he's had an extension from his personal sponsor Optus. It's the one that looks like it, on the side of his helmet it says yes. So they've extended
the Australian phone brand, isn't it?
Yeah. They've extended for another 2 years. So clearly something's happening there where he believes that obviously he's going to be racing somewhere for 2 years, and has explained it to
V8 supercars in Australia. Hey, maybe, Matt, maybe. You don't know. You can't say that ain't the truth, right? There's straws. You clutching them. I like it. I respect it. All right, look, we've talked Alpine. Hayden, what about Williams? Because I feel like Williams was the other team that was, being mentioned a lot. Yes, it's a big downstep, but they are working on a project. They are building towards something, and maybe a fresh, set. And obviously, Albon's confirmed now as well, and that Latifi seat's been, up for a lot of. We feel like Nicholas probably isn't going to be in that seat next year. But is Ricciardo the right man for both Williams and for Ricciardo?
I think Ricciardo is the right man for Williams. I mean, he's a good driver. He can definitely elevate the team. The one thing that I think is going to put a stop to that is I think he's going to be too expensive. And I do think Williams, despite there being a budget cap, I do think they still need somebody who can inject some funds into the team, just like Haas as well. I think they're two teams who, despite there being a budget cap, it does help them to maybe even the playing field, but they also need a driver who can give them a little bit of chachunga in the bank account.
Yeah,
really.
But Ricciardo shifts merch, Hayden. He's the most popular driver in the States.
For sure, but merch isn't going to replace, a massive paycheck that Latifi, for example, is going to come. It's not the same.
You don't know.
It is expensive,
mate,
but it's not the same.
It's very expensive.
It's not the same. Nicholas Latifi, all they need to do is just put a goat on a Nicholas Latifi's face on a goat, and it would just sell like hot buns. So there you go, Williams. You could have that. But I think obviously he's a great fit for them. Albon and Ricciardo, Williams just becoming the Red Bull rejects, I think could be a good place.
Great. Very good. Very good. Very good.
I gotta disagree. I don't think he would be a good fit for Williams. I just don't think. I just don't see that gelling that well, honestly. I don't know what it is.
At the back of the field, and you want to see him fight?
Well, no, because that's Aston. But I just don't. I don't know. I just can't really see him going into the Williams. Yeah, I just don't. I don't think. I think for me, I don't think I can see him going to a brand new team now. I think he needs to go back to somewhere where he's more used to, or at least into like a family that he's kind of used to, not rather than like a completely. Potentially, like I can't see him go to like a potentially, yeah. I can't see him going to like a new team, and I just don't think the Williams kind of fit because. Like I know, Tommy. You always talk about like, oh, they got this big plan. It's like, well, he's been promised that before, and it's not really worked out.
Having a big plan means nothing if you've got nothing to show for it.
L plan.
If you just say this is what we want to do, but you don't show how you're going to do it, that's why I think Aston are exciting because at least they're saying and they're making a building to show. At least we're trying to do something. But if a team just goes, this is what we want to do. Does it really mean anything? And that's why I think people have kind of Alpine.
It's just bricks and mortar, mate. Bricks and mortar don't win races, Hayden. Come on. No, bring back HRT. Stick Daniel in that.
Yes. Hispania Racing.
But yeah, for me, I just can't see it. I don't think it would be a good fit. I mean, obviously, like. If he was to wear the team colours, people can sort of be like, oh yeah, he's smart. He'd be as he is now, as in McLaren with Williams with different. That would be it. But I don't think the team. I think for me now, my vision of Williams is still kind of being towards the back of the grid. I haven't seen anything that's making me very excited to go forward, like to go to like, oh, they're fighting for the top of the midfield. Like, yes, you can argue with like Aston, for example. Yeah, at least they're trying, you know. Whereas with Williams, it's kind of like. Well, if they keep Latifi on for another season, that kind of like rest assured where their head's at, they need the financials. Wherever someone like Nick de Vries comes in, they're okay for financials and they want to go for more of like a younger sort of dynamic. If they were to bring Daniel Ricciardo in, I don't think that pairing kind of would really work with Albon because it's like, well, why are you bringing in like a senior for someone who's already a seasoned veteran, if that makes sense? It's yeah, for me, I just don't see the dynamic sort of working. But do you think it would work, Tomo?
Doesn't pass the Matt Amos vibe check. You know what I think, right? So I think if Alpine's an option, I think it has to be Alpine over Williams. I think it's too much. It's in some ways, right? You know, Daniel's driven with Alpine in the past, and he's been fast. You can't doubt that. 2020, he knows that he can go to that team, and yes, it's a different car, but he can go to that team, and that team has been able to make it work for him in the past, and they've got the data, like you said, all that. To go to Williams, that's a whole new team, that's a whole new car. There's more of a risk that this kind of thing could happen again. Like, I'm not being funny. Like, you look through Daniel Ricciardo's career, when he's been on it, when he's been in a car that he's comfortable in, he's been undrivable. Like, he got 7 wins in that Red Bull against, some of the greatest of the modern era and rarely had the quickest car when he was delivering those wins as well. But when he doesn't, when he's not fully comfortable, we've seen him. Obviously, he's getting his ass handed to him by Lando. He lost out to Kvyat in the Red Bull. We can't forget that. I think given the standard he'd set when he beat Vettel, I think that was a big shock to a lot of people. And even like his first year at Renault was like better than Hülkenberg for sure. But I just think that it's a big risk to go to. Like he left Red Bull for Alpine to Renault for a project. Then they left that project to go to McLaren and would now be leaving that project to go to another project. It's just, you haven't got time, Daniel, to keep moving projects. So I think
you can't start from project zero. No. You need to have he needs stability. That's the main thing Ricciardo needs. He needs to be like, right, at least I can go back to my old family where they still hopefully like me. They know what I like from my car, and he just needs the stability. And if he was to go to AlphaTauri,
the ceiling,
not Williams.
The ceiling with Alpine is so much higher, I think, than Williams. It's a manufacturer. It's like Renault, Nissan, Mitsubishi group is like a huge manufacturer, and I think that gets overlooked a lot as well because I think as a customer team, and I've said this about McLaren, if McLaren start beating Mercedes, like I don't know, you got to think, is that going to lead to some kind of issues? Like Red Bull were fine, like cleaning up world champions when Renault were pretty much just an engine provider and had a little pokey F1 team. I just think that, that there's more at risk if he goes to Williams because as well, Albon's driving pretty well. And I think there's a higher risk of him going there, it not being his cup of tea and then him getting shown up again versus he knows it can work at Alpine. So I think that has to be the choice. from Williams' point of view, I think commercially, it would be a great signing. Daniel's huge in the States. We know the American market. Obviously, DeRilton is an American company. That's a big deal to them. Obviously, with Logie Sargent coming up and potentially going to get enough super license points, I think he only needs to finish like 5th in F2. That could be, you think how close he was to Piastri in Formula 3 when they were in equal machinery, and Porsche, he was right up there. I think that's probably, a factor in the back of their mind as well, because they don't want to... But also, you can promote too soon. For me, Williams, there's sense to it, but not as much as Alpine.
Not for him. Yeah, it makes sense. Like if Williams were to have a knock on the door and it's just Daniel Ricciardo with a sleeping bag and be like, "Hello, I'm here to drive." Of course, they'll be like, "Yes, come in. We need you."
He's lost the Mclaren job and he's become homeless.
Yeah, well,
it's all falling apart,
mate. Daniel Ricciardo has money. You can't. That man has money. He was paid more than anyone in F1 to race for that bloody Renault team. Honestly, and then he's potentially getting paid off here as well, off of McLaren. But I mean, I don't know. What are the Hayden? What are the other options? Because I think all the talk spin around Alpine and Williams, right?
Alpine and McLaren are the two teams that I think now are a comfortable 4th, 5th best team. And then Alfa Romeo and Haas are two kind of yo-yo teams. Sometimes they're that 6th best team and they're able to fight with the Alpine and the McLaren, but then some races the car doesn't suit the track and they're back down in Q1. I think they're very much a yo-yo team at the moment. So Alpine is obviously the first choice, but if there's no other choice there, Alfa Romeo or Haas, like I say, Williams, they can potentially move up through the field. Haas and Alfa, I think Alfa Romeo maybe have the better facilities to showcase that they can maybe be a bit more of a steady midfield team. But none of them really are that exciting. Like no one's really as excited about these other teams because they've showed promise this season. They've definitely stepped up from where they were. It's brilliant. It's great to see. But the big question that I think a lot of people are asking is how long can this stay going for? Will this just be a flash in the pan this season, or will Alfa Romeo and Haas continue next year to develop the car further and remain in that fight for the midfield? The other seat that's available at the moment is the seat alongside Pierre Gasly in AlphaTauri, but I feel like, is he going to go back to the Red Bull family? No, that's gone. I'm sorry. Helmut Marko would much rather promote a Liam Lawson, and Iwasa is his name, also in
Iwasa.
F2.
Yeah, he's smashing
keep Yuki Tsunoda, because I think they've got that Honda partnership now remaining. So it's going to be Yuki Tsunoda or it's going to be Iwasa in the team. So unless Gasly goes to Alpine and they just go, Ocon, you go in that room, Gasly, you go in that room. You don't have to talk to each other, but just drive for us. And he has that seat. But the Red Bull family is just a no-go. So the four teams really are, Alpine, Alfa, Haas, Williams. They're the four teams.
Quick one. Can you just imagine, tomorrow, you wake up, you get your phone out, you go on Twitter. Can you just imagine if you saw the announcement that he was to go to AlphaTauri alongside Pierre Gasly? Can you just imagine if that actually happened? No. I'm not saying this. No, I'm not saying this should happen because I don't think he should either.
I can't even fathom that.
But I think my mind would explode and be like, "Wait, what the fuck's just happened?" I don't think he should do that either. Because there's been so much stuff about the Red Bull family and the reason why he originally left. Because of all the politics all going on and stuff, but he's always kept it in sort of good spirits with Christian Horner. But if I was to see, that really crappy F1 border text saying breaking, Ricciardo joins AlphaTauri, I'd just be like, what the fuck is going on? But I think this silly season honestly has been so mad compared to what we've had the previous years.
Very silly.
And it's all stemmed from Sebastian Vettel randomly announcing his retirement, which we all knew was going to come at some point, but it's just a bit sooner than we all thought. But my God.
I think even the Vettel thing was calm because we were just like, okay, Aston Martin, their pickup maybe Hulkenberg. And then Alonso going there was like, what? But
it just started the dominoes falling.
Yeah. It's Haas or Alpha if it's not Alpine for me. More likely Haas or Alfa Romeo, because Alfa Romeo is a sticky one. Zhou's been doing such a good job for them. He's been consistent. The car's had issues. It's the least reliable car on the grid. So it's been unfortunate, more so for Zhou compared to Bottas. It's his first season. He's been doing well, but there's been that rumour consistently that they want Pourchaire to step into that car when he's ready. If he doesn't win F2, they can keep him in F2 for another year and they can keep Zhou in the Alpha, or potentially they bring up Pourchaire and Haas take Zhou instead, because in my opinion, Haas, for them, a more reliable option is Zhou compared to Schumacher, and there's that rumour as well that Schumacher is going to be dropped from the FDA anyway, which means that they wouldn't get that Ferrari discounted engine for them. So they either have to pick up other Ferrari Junior or pick up someone who's going to give them money, which is Zhou.
Because I think there's one thing, right? So my left field shout for Ricciardo is Alfa Romeo because Audi. Now, I know there's been a lot of rumours around Porsche and Red Bull, and that seems to be pretty much like guaranteed that that's going to happen. But there's also been a lot of rumours around Audi. They were sniffing around McLaren. McLaren said no. Alfa Romeo Sauber have been a team that consistently over the years, be it BMW, whoever, who have, very much been prepared to pimp themselves out and be like, oh yeah, you can stick your badge on the car. Alfa Romeo is essentially, it is just a title sponsor. Yeah. It's still Sauber, the racing team. And I think the prospect of an Audi, a manufacturer of the size of Audi, of the clout of Audi coming into F1, whether that's, I don't know how long we're looking for that. I mean, it would probably start as a like for like. If it does happen, I imagine it would start as a like for like. Again, just a title sponsored deal where Audi it's the Audi Sauber Formula One team or whatever. But that prospect for Daniel Ricciardo, if he's having these conversations and there's a potential, I think if that happens and it is looking like Audi really do want to get into F1 and Alfa Romeo seem to be the team to go for, they've got this massive facility in Himwell, they've got the wind tunnel, they've got all that facility there. In terms of when you look at F1 teams who, the highest amount of facility but the least amount of outcome from all that facility, I think you've got to put Sauber right at the top, unfortunately. Yeah. Considering the facilities they've got there, they've had no success, really. I mean, they've got a better facility than McLaren because they've got a wind tunnel and it's just as impressive inside. You've been there? Yeah, you've been there.
I've been there. Yeah, I've been there because back in the day when I used to work in Formula E, our team powertrain was made by Audi. So we would fly over and do, because obviously they got their own test track. It's not like a huge track, but they have a test track just for, sort of accelerating and the sort of corner speeding and G-force and stuff like that. And so we got to look around the whole of their facilities and it's fucking huge. Like literally, if you go to I've seen from the outside, the campus size of like Mercedes, this wipes the floor with it because it's not only just making their supercars and it's not doing their Le Mans cars. It's doing also like Formula E. I know they're leaving that very soon. Or they have left. Sorry. But they've got so many racing divisions on it, so they've got everything there, and it's such a huge campus. But the main thing though with that is, when will they get the entry? Because obviously it's talks and promises, but it's actually like, well, if it's going to be like in a couple of years' time, then maybe. If it's not for like another 10 years or something, because even like with the Porsche taking over from Red Bull, that's not going to be happening until minimum 2026. So it's like, well, if it's not going to happen in the next year or two, then yeah, if it was happening say next year, then I could absolutely see Ricciardo potentially going to Alpha.
They're confirmed.
I mean, he might also have
Alfa
flashbacks
is
as
confirmed
to
that they are title sponsor for next year. Anyway,
for next year.
But
I don't know. Yeah. For next year, for sure. I think, but if Daniel is, sold on the idea that it might not extend above then, and then maybe 2024 there's a title sponsorship with Audi, I think that could potentially be enough to sway. As a left field, I still think Williams and Alpine are more likely. So for me, it's Alpine. Matt, Hayden.
Yeah, Alpine for me.
We're on agreement,
Alpine. Yeah, Alpine or Formula E.
Alpine or Formula E. Oh, Matt, you sad.
He can do a Hulkenberg, and he can be third driver for Aston Martin. There you go. How's that? He'd be the third driver for Aston Martin. Join Nico Hulkenberg there and just learn a lot from Lance Stroll.
That could happen. and also, one thing before we end, a quick conversation. If Ricciardo doesn't go to Alpine, Matt Amos, who takes that Alpine seat?
Oh, God.
Because I think this is an interesting one, actually.
Yeah.
If Ricciardo doesn't go, what are their options? Or maybe sit on it. Maybe Hayden. Do you have one? Do you have one off the top of your head? 'Cause I haven't seen much talk about who could maybe get that seat if it's not Ricciardo.
Pierre Gasly.
Yeah,
I know.
Gasly
They
as
have
well.
to try and stop the pettiness between the two drivers and be like, "Come on, guys, what are you really fighting out?" It was a girl. I'm pretty sure. They fought over both going out with the same girl. Get over it, okay? You're big boys now. You can stop cropping each other out of your Instagram pictures, and we're gonna make this dream French team, and that's it. Because Gasly is just
that would be dreamy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I've got to go for Gasly as well, because I think it makes sense, because then, Red Bull, they've got a plethora of drivers they could sort of move up. I think Gasly makes the most sense rather than putting in someone new from F2. Because I think with the F2 current drivers at the moment, there's not any ones that we haven't mentioned so far. There hasn't been any standout ones. But yeah, so I think for me it would be Gasly. Who would you put in though, Tomo?
I think I get it with Gasly. I actually think a slightly more exciting pick would be stealing Théo Pourchaire from Sauber, because he's French as well, and then stick him in the Alpine. If because he's closed that gap up to Drogovic sharpish. Yeah. He's much younger than Felipe. Well, say much younger. He's a good few years younger than Felipe.
Yeah.
And I think he's having a stronger kind of end to the season. So I think Théo Pourchaire. They're not going to be short of options. They're offering an F1 seat in what has been, I think, the fourth best car this year. So I think Alpine will find someone.
Bring back Nico Hülkenberg to the team.
Kamui Kobayashi!
Yeah!
Come on! We can all get behind that 100%. Right. Go on. He's got one last take. I was going to wrap up, but go on.
Oh, yeah, no. I was just thinking, could you get a surprise one of,
surprise?
Maybe Magnussen? Maybe?
Bring back Roman Grosjean. He's also French.
Oh, yeah. And everyone in IndyCar hates him at the minute. He's been getting in loads of beef, isn't he? Marcus Ericsson and Joseph Newgarden just called him out on Twitter. It's quite funny.
Yeah.
Bring back Roman.
Maybe Magnussen? Maybe. Yeah.
It's onto a good thing it has. But we'll see. Let us know in the comments below if you're watching on YouTube. Who do you think should actually... Yeah, I think that's just as interesting. Who's getting that Alpine seat? If it's not Ricciardo. But also, where do you think Ricciardo ends up? Is it Alpine? Is it somewhere else? Is it Formula E? Let us know below.
No.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Adrian. Again, if you didn't do it at the start, all right, because I did tell you to, but if you didn't, then 5 stars, comment, tell us how good looking we all are. And it's been a pleasure, boys. Thank you all for watching, listening, and we will see you next week. The Talking Points podcast. Ciao, adios, we are done.